They were shot to death in their Milwaukee recording studio in October of 2007. 21-year-old LaLa Brown was a rising singing star and had appeared in a video on the BET network.
Someone knows what happened. Someone knows what happened to my baby and to the Browns' babies.
I can't even tell, because me personally, I didn't think LaLa was that fine to me. But I'm talking about every single dude. It was something about her. They used to lose their mind about it.
In 2007, Milwaukee was rocked by a tragedy that still raises questions today. LaLa Brown was murdered 18 years ago, and only now are pieces of the puzzle beginning to surface.
This is the first significant break in the investigation in nearly 9 years. Their studio on 55th and Lisbon had been burglarized before the murders. And I spoke with LaLa's father tonight, and he said he was aware a suspect was in custody.
Just 21, with her producer boyfriend, JeTannue Kool Aid Clayborn, at her side, she was found dead inside a recording studio. Fans remembered her breakout on Lyfe Jennings' SEX, a voice ready for stardom and destined for more.
And I was like, all right, cool. Let me hear you do your thing. And she did her thing. She sang a Beyonce song, and I was like, okay, I'm going to New York tomorrow. I need somebody on this record.
One of your biggest songs, SEX, with LaLa Brown.
Right.
It's got 10 million streams on Spotify. Is that your second biggest song?
I don't know. They all big to me, hell.
Yeah.
But one mystery has never faded. What really happened to LaLa Brown? Before we dive into the crime scene and investigation, we need to understand who LaLa really was. Yolanda Rose Brown, better known as LaLa Brown, grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was the youngest of 5 children, born on May 20th, 1986. Her mother was of Mexican descent, her father African American, and they always said she was full of energy from the very beginning. LaLa loved to sing and dance around the house, and by age 11, she was already performing under the name Premier. She sang at weddings and later in bars, slowly gaining experience. But her real breakthrough came years later when she caught the attention of R&B singer Lyfe Jennings. In 2006, Jennings released a song called SEX, a track warning young girls about the dangers of early sex. Jennings needed a female voice to balance his message, and LaLa got the spot. She sang the hook, appeared in the video, and helped the track climb to number 3 on the Billboard R&B chart. For many listeners, that was the first time they ever heard LaLa Brown's voice.
When she jumped on that song, was that like her first vocal appearance on an album?
From there, things seemed to be moving fast. She toured with Jennings and was introduced to a wider audience. But just as things were looking bright, her career took a hit. After disagreements with Jennings, she was dropped from the tour.
She went on tour with.
Okay, and then she left the tour. Was it under good circumstances or not so good?
Come on, man, you know the answer to that. Why are you trying to...
Friends later said she wasn't ready to give up. She returned to Milwaukee in 2007, determined to build her solo career. She recorded 3 songs, I'm Feeling It, Rescue Me, and Give Them What They Want. Fans believe the last track reflected her own struggles in the industry. Back in Milwaukee, LaLa wasn't alone in this dream. She was in a relationship with JeTannue Kool Aid Clayborn, a 22-year-old producer who had his own ambitions in music. Together, they worked in his studio, Loud Enough Productions, creating tracks they hoped would launch both their careers.
Her boyfriend was her manager, and I don't know why he got into his mind that maybe me and her had something going on.
On October 19th, 2007, their dreams came to a sudden and violent end. LaLa and Clayborn were both shot and killed inside the very studio where they spent most of their time. Their bodies weren't found until days later, when Clayborn's brother checked in after not hearing from him.
JeTannue's brother made the gruesome discovery.
He'll never forget what he saw.
The news shook Milwaukee. For LaLa, the tragedy was especially devastating because she had a young daughter, Amira, who was just a toddler at the time. Fans and family could not believe that someone so full of promise had been silenced at just 21 years old. Media headlines described them as two rising stars, cut down before they even had a chance to shine. For many, it was also a painful reminder of how dangerous the music world could be, even for artists just starting out. The murders would later spark endless theories, countless questions, and years of frustration as the case remained unsolved. But before we get into the crime scene itself, it's important to understand just how much these two meant to their city. When the bodies of LaLa Brown and JeTannue Kool Aid Clayborn were finally discovered, it was October 22nd, 2007. By then, they had already been dead for several days. The place where they were found was supposed to be a safe space for creativity, a small recording studio called Loud Enough Productions, located in Milwaukee. Instead, it turned into the site of one of the city's most shocking double murders. The discovery happened because Clayborn's brother had grown worried. He hadn't heard from him in days, which was unusual since they stayed in close contact. When he decided to check on him, he unlocked the studio and walked into a nightmare. Inside, he found both LaLa and Clayborn dead. Police were immediately called and the crime scene was locked down. From the start, investigators noticed strange details. First, the studio door had been locked. That raised a key question. If the door was secured, then who had the key? And how did the killer leave the building without leaving obvious signs of breaking in? The lack of forced entry made detectives believe that the killer was likely someone the couple knew and trusted.
And in this case tonight, a double murder where questions have not been answered. There's not enough information. No one has been charged. There's no justice. There are no answers. And we're asking you for your help.
The way the two were killed also told a story. Reports later revealed that Clayborn had defensive wounds, meaning he had tried to fight back against his attacker. He put up some kind of struggle before he was fatally shot. LaLa's wounds, on the other hand, suggested something different. She was shot in the back. That detail has always stood out because it made some believe she might not have even seen the attack coming. Another key fact was nothing appeared to have been stolen. The studio had been burglarized before, so police initially considered whether this was another robbery. But this time, expensive equipment and personal items were left behind. That made the robbery theory harder to believe. Whoever came into that studio seemed to have one mission: take the lives of the two young artists. The condition of the bodies also showed how long it had been before they were discovered. By the time police arrived, LaLa and Clayborn had been dead since October 19th, 3 days earlier. The delay made it harder for investigators to piece together the timeline of exactly what happened inside the studio that night. For Milwaukee police, the studio crime scene created more questions than answers. Who would kill two people with so much potential? Why would they leave everything else untouched? And most of all, how did they get in and out without forcing entry? In the days following the discovery, the police worked around the clock interviewing friends, associates, and anyone who had been in contact with LaLa and Clayborn before their deaths. Still, no one could give them the breakthrough they needed. What shocked the public even more was that, despite these chilling details, no arrests were made immediately. The locked studio, the defensive wounds, and the fact that LaLa was shot in the back, these became the first puzzle pieces in a case that has remained unsolved for nearly 2 decades. After the crime scene was processed and the shock began to settle in, the big question everyone asked was why? Why would anyone want to kill LaLa Brown and JeTannue Kool Aid Clayborn? Over time, several theories have surfaced. Some came from police speculation, others from fans online, and a few from people close to the couple. The first and perhaps most common idea was that it could have been a personal dispute. LaLa and Clayborn were not only partners in music, but also in life. That made some wonder if jealousy or personal drama had played a role. Some even whispered about the possibility of a love triangle, though nothing was ever proven. Still, because there were no signs of forced entry, many people believed the killer had to be someone they trusted, possibly even a person close to their inner circle.
We actually don't know what the motive, behind these murders were. But police do believe the couple knew the killer. One of them opened the door to the studio. Nearby surveillance video shows the killer entering. Moments later.
The second theory focused on professional jealousy. LaLa's rise had been fast and noticeable. After appearing on Lyfe Jennings' hit song SEX, she suddenly had national attention. She was young, talented, and had the kind of voice that stood out. Back in Milwaukee, she was starting to work on her solo music with Clayborn producing. For some people in the same circle, that could have created tension. In the music world, rivalries aren't uncommon, especially when someone looks like they're about to take off while others are still struggling.
LaLa was a lot to deal with, and I think most talented people are. They got so much energy.
The third theory was about a robbery gone wrong. The studio where the murders happened had been broken into before. That history made police consider whether this could have been another burglary. But this theory lost strength quickly. Nothing was taken. Expensive equipment and other valuables were still inside, untouched. If robbery had been the motive, it made no sense for the killer to leave everything behind after committing a double murder. These three theories, personal dispute, industry jealousy, and robbery, each told a different story, but none of them had hard evidence behind them. That's why, over the years, the case has remained filled with speculation. Even though police never publicly confirmed a motive, the details of how the crime happened pushed many people to lean toward the idea of a targeted killing. Clayborn's defensive wounds showed he had tried to resist. LaLa being shot in the back suggested she may have been caught off guard. Those details made it seem less like a random act and more like someone came there with a purpose. Fans, friends, and even people in online forums have gone back and forth over these possibilities for years. Some say jealousy was the only explanation. Others point to LaLa's growing fame and think the music business itself brought danger her way. And still others hold on to the idea that robbery, even if it seemed unlikely, could have gone wrong that night. But without clear answers, all these theories remained just that, theories. And while people argued over the possible motives, the police investigation faced its own struggles, which we'll get into next. From the very beginning, the investigation into LaLa Brown and JeTannue Kool Aid Clayborn's murders was complicated. Detectives worked hard, interviewing family, friends, and others in the Milwaukee music scene. But despite the shocking nature of the crime, there were no immediate arrests. The locked studio, the missing motive, and the lack of clear evidence left investigators struggling. In the weeks after the murders, police admitted they had few leads. They knew the killer likely wasn't a random stranger. Everything pointed to someone the victims knew. Still, without physical evidence or witnesses, the case slowed down. Months turned into years, and frustration grew, especially for LaLa's family, who were desperate for answers.
Right now at 6, family and friends searching for answers 10 years after their loved ones were gunned down.
But the story didn't end there. In 2016, nearly 9 years after the murders, Milwaukee police announced something that caught everyone's attention. They said they had a suspect in custody on unrelated charges in another state. According to reports, this person had connections that made investigators believe they could be tied to the double homicide. For a moment, it felt like justice might finally be within reach. Then came 2017, when police told reporters they had built a strong enough case to present to the district attorney's office. At that point, many believed charges would finally be filed. Local news outlets reported that detectives felt confident in what they had gathered. Families and fans were hopeful that an arrest and trial would follow.
And he's not going nowhere right now. So they're not rushing it, but they would like to bring him back to stand trial.
But nothing happened. No charges were filed. No names were released. And once again, the case stalled. By 2021, Milwaukee police confirmed the murders were still classified as an open investigation. That meant the suspect from 2016 and 2017 had never faced trial, and the DA's office hadn't moved forward with the evidence. For LaLa's family, it was crushing. They had been told more than once that answers were coming, only to be left with silence. For the community, it was confusing. How could a case with 2 victims, some physical evidence, and even a reported suspect still be unresolved after so many years? Part of the problem, many believe, was the timing. By the time the case was re-examined years later, memories had faded, possible witnesses had moved on, and evidence wasn't as fresh as it had once been. Every year that passed made the investigation harder to solve. Police have always said they continue to work on the case. They've also asked the public for help, encouraging anyone with information to come forward. But despite occasional updates, there has never been a breakthrough that led to charges or a conviction. The truth is, this case has become one of Milwaukee's most frustrating cold cases. Officially, it's not closed. Investigators insist they still hope for justice, but for the families of LaLa and Clayborn, nearly 2 decades of waiting has felt like an endless cycle of hope and disappointment. And while the investigation dragged on, the city of Milwaukee and especially its music scene was left to deal with the loss of 2 rising talents who were taken far too soon. When news broke about the deaths of LaLa Brown and JeTannue Kool Aid Clayborn, Milwaukee was stunned. This wasn't just another headline. These were 2 young people who had been pouring their hearts into music, representing the city in a big way. LaLa, at only 21, had already tasted national success. Clayborn, at 22, was working hard to build a name as a producer. Their murders felt like a devastating blow, not only to their families, but to an entire community that believed in them. LaLa's family, in particular, was left shattered. Her parents, siblings, and especially her daughter, Amira, had to live with the unthinkable reality that she was gone. Amira was just a toddler when it happened, far too young to understand the loss. Over the years, LaLa's mother, Maria, often spoke about how difficult it was to raise a child who would grow up without her mother's presence. For them, every birthday and every anniversary of LaLa's death has been another reminder of the hole left behind.
LaLa's father, William Brown, still mourns the loss of his beautiful, talented, self-made daughter.
Clayborn's family carried the same grief. His brother, who found the bodies in the studio, had to live with the memory of that traumatic discovery.
JeTannue's brother made the gruesome discovery.
He'll never forget what he saw.
Friends described him as someone deeply passionate about music, a young man who was determined to put Milwaukee on the map. Losing him was painful not only for his family, but for every artist who had recorded with him in that small studio. The local music scene also felt the loss immediately. Milwaukee wasn't known as a major hub for R&B or hip-hop at the time, but LaLa was proof that talent from the city could break through nationally. When she appeared on Lyfe Jennings' SEX, people in Milwaukee saw her as one of their own, making it to a bigger stage. Her death crushed that sense of hope. For many young artists, it was a reminder of how fragile dreams could be. Community gatherings began almost immediately after the murders. Candlelight vigils were held, and fans played her music in memory of her. At LaLa's funeral on October 25, 2007, hundreds of people showed up, including Lyfe Jennings himself. The service was filled with music and emotion, a sign of just how many people she had touched in her short life. She was later laid to rest at Graceland Cemetery in Milwaukee. In the years since, memorials have continued. Fans and loved ones still post online about her, sharing old performance clips, photos, and personal memories. Each October, those closest to her bring flowers and gather to honor her and Clayborn. For many, keeping their memory alive has been just as important as pushing for justice.
I want to honor them and let them know we haven't forgotten about them.
The murders became more than just a crime story. they became a symbol of loss for Milwaukee. People saw it as a tragedy that showed how quickly promising lives could be cut short. And even though the investigation dragged on without answers, the community never stopped talking about LaLa and Clayborn. Their music, their energy, and their potential still linger, making the city's grief feel fresh even after 18 years. From the start, the murders of LaLa Brown and JeTannue Kool Aid Clayborn were more than just a local headline. The case quickly drew media attention, not only because LaLa had already stepped into the national spotlight, but because the tragedy highlighted the fragility of young lives chasing big dreams. Television crews covered the scene, newspapers ran photos of the smiling young singer, and radio stations played her music in tribute. In the weeks that followed, her story traveled beyond Milwaukee. National outlets touched on her short but bright career, tying her name to Lyfe Jennings and her unforgettable voice on SEX. But after the initial wave of coverage, the spotlight faded, just as the case itself grew cold. Forensic evidence did exist, though police have never released full details to the public. Reports confirmed there were no signs of forced entry, which suggested the killer was either known or trusted by the victims. Clayborn's defensive wounds hinted at a struggle, while LaLa's wounds suggested she had been caught by surprise. Items inside the studio, including valuable recording equipment, were left untouched, further fueling theories that this was a targeted killing rather than a robbery. Over the years, detectives have stated that they presented evidence to the district attorney's office. In 2016 and 2017, hope surged when police revealed they had identified a possible suspect, even holding the person on unrelated charges. At the time, authorities hinted that the case was closer than ever to being solved. But no charges were ever filed. No name was ever released, and the families were left with silence once again. The media revisited the case briefly each anniversary, with headlines like "Still No Justice for LaLa Brown," reminding the public that the case remained unsolved. For fans and loved ones, those stories felt like salt in the wound, proof that the murders had not been forgotten, but also a reminder that justice had not been served. Meanwhile, online communities picked up where official outlets left off. Fans on forums, social media groups, and even amateur true crime podcasts have kept the story alive, combing through every public detail, re-examining the theories, and calling for someone, anyone, to come forward with new information. For LaLa's daughter Amira, now grown, and for both families, the fight continues. They've held on to hope that one day the case will be solved, that the forensics and investigative work done all those years ago will finally lead to answers. Police still classify the investigation as open, urging anyone with information to come forward. 18 years later, the murders of LaLa Brown and JeTannue Kool Aid Clayborn stand as one of Milwaukee's most haunting cold cases. The community remembers their music, their families remember their laughter, and the city still waits for justice.